The tale of Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez wasn't just about love, it was about power, luxury, and a life most people can only dream of. Together, they looked like an empire in motion. He was the visionary who transformed online shopping into a trillion-dollar empire, and she was the dazzling presence who lit up every room they entered. Cameras adored them, magazines praised them, and for years they seemed untouchable. But what happens when the shine begins to crack? What happens when the person you thought was your anchor becomes the storm? The first signs weren't splashed across headlines or Hollywood gossip columns. They appeared in quiet corners, whispers that slipped through boardrooms and late-night Wall Street calls. Sharp-eyed analysts noticed Amazon's stock behaving strangely. Not wild enough to trigger alarms, but just off-rhythm enough to raise eyebrows. At first, it was brushed off. After all, when you're Jeff Bezos, moving billions isn't news, it's routine. But as days turned into weeks, the oddities grew louder, refusing to fade into background noise. Soon, harmless speculation transformed into dangerous curiosity. People began asking questions they knew they shouldn't. And a single name kept surfacing, not a rival CEO, not a hidden investor, but Lauren Sanchez. The same woman who had stood hand-in-hand with Bezos at galas on yachts, and even inside the cabin of his own rocket. Could she really be tied to these ripples of financial chaos? The suggestion alone carried the sting of betrayal, the kind that shakes both boardrooms and bedrooms. Now picture the scene inside Bezos' palatial Seattle mansion. A home so vast that silence doesn't comfort, it suffocates. In those gilded halls, wealth becomes meaningless when doubt begins to settle. The man who once controlled the world's biggest marketplace now faced the possibility that the deepest cut might not come from Wall Street or Washington, but from the woman he trusted most. The glow of a monitor lit up the dimmed room, its cold blue light reflecting off tense faces. Bezos' financial team rushed in, their voices tight, their expressions drained of color. What they had uncovered wasn't just unusual, it was staggering. A single transfer worth nearly $3 billion, not the work of hackers, not some careless slip in accounting, but something far more intentional. Precise, personal. Insiders say Bezos froze the moment the figures appeared. His empire, once a symbol of dominance and invincibility, suddenly looked fragile. The data on that screen confirmed the unthinkable. Billions in Amazon stock had shifted without his direct command. What followed was a scene that insiders still whisper about. The silence cracked with the sound of glass shattering as Bezos' fist slammed against the table. His voice, usually measured and commanding, broke as he repeated the same words over and over. How could she? How could she do this to me? For him, these weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They were the essence of his identity, his proof of power, his life's work carved into digits. And now to think that Lauren Sanchez, the woman he had trusted with his heart, could be behind it? The pain was deeper than any financial loss. It was a wound of betrayal and humiliation. But the shocking part wasn't that Bezos discovered it. The world didn't hear the story through him or even his inner circle. The truth crept into daylight in the most mysterious way: a leak. An unmarked envelope arrived on a journalist's desk, no name, no return address. Inside, a single USB stick stamped only with the initials JB. On that drive were confidential files, transaction codes, timestamps, and digital fingerprints that all pointed in one chilling direction: Lauren. When experts dissected the evidence, the pattern was clear. This wasn't just a shift in a billionaire's portfolio. It was too sharp, too consistent, too deliberate. What they were looking at wasn't a random financial maneuver. It was a calculated move. And if the whispers were true, it had come from inside his own home. The trades weren't random. They were deliberate, methodical, executed with an almost surgical precision. And every trail of data, every digital bread crumbled back to her. Overnight, the whispers that once lived in boardrooms exploded onto front pages. Newsrooms buzzed, financial analysts scrambled, and the world realized this wasn't just about stocks. It was personal. Still, a burning question remained unanswered. Why? Was it hunger for wealth? A bid for independence? Or something darker, an attempt to strip the world's richest man of the very power that defined him? Those close to Lauren painted a different picture. They argued she wasn't simply chasing billions. She was chasing freedom. They claimed she was tired of existing as a passenger in Bezos' universe, constantly orbiting his empire without ever holding the controls. To her, betrayal wasn't about money. It was about finally seizing her own throne, rewriting the script where she was no longer a supporting character but the lead. For outsiders, the theory seemed outrageous. But for those who knew the icy tensions behind the glitz, it felt disturbingly possible. Soon rumors began to swirl of covert encounters. Witnesses swore they had seen Lauren slipping in and out of elite hotels, quietly meeting with financial tacticians, the kind of shadowy advisors who operate in the wars between billionaires. Secure calls routed through encrypted servers, conversations bouncing across continents like ghosts in the system. The movements were invisible on the surface, but undeniable to those tracking the pattern. Then came the most chilling revelation yet. A leaked audio clip surfaced passed hand to hand like contraband. An Ida woman's voice, believed to be Lauren's, cut through with surgical coldness. He thought he owned everything, but he never saw me coming. It wasn't the voice of a lover or a partner. It was the voice of someone claiming power, someone who had already crossed the line. Inside the towering walls of Bezos' mansion, insiders say the confrontation that followed felt less like an argument and more like a storm ripping through the night, violent, unstoppable, and impossible to forget. Bezos finally confronted Lauren, clutching documents that proved everything. His voice, usually steady and commanding, cracked under the weight of anger and disbelief. $3 billion, Lauren? Do you even realize what you've done? But her reply wasn't panicked nor apologetic. It was calmly calm. She didn't look away. She didn't break. Instead, she delivered words that cut sharper than any financial loss. Your empire, Jeff? You act as if it belongs to you alone. Maybe it's time you understood it doesn't. For a man who had spent decades guarding every corner of his empire, the realization that the dagger hadn't come from rivals or regulators, but from the woman he trusted most, was devastating. Insiders say that after that night, Bezos changed. The confidence that once defined him crumbled. The titan who once stood untouchable now looked shaken, fragile. Those closest whispered that paranoia consumed him. He became convinced this wasn't about money alone, it was part of something bigger. A plot to strip away not just his fortune, but the very legacy he built. And in this vulnerable moment, Bezos made a move no one expected. Desperate for insight, he reached out to an unlikely source, a rival he once sparred with in the public eye. A man who mocked his rockets, dismissed his visions, and delighted in his failures. Elon Musk. According to insiders, Musk didn't offer sympathy when he picked up the call. Instead, he laughed. So Lauren outplayed you, huh, Jeff? Welcome to the club. It was a jab, but also a grim acknowledgement that betrayal is a currency even billionaires can't escape. Then Musk's tone hardened. His advice was blunt, even ruthless. Control the story before it controls you. Make her bleed where it matters most. That was the advice Musk left him with, the kind of ruthless counsel that could turn a private wound into a public battlefield. As Bezos weighed his options, Lauren was already moving pieces on her own chessboard. Instead of retreating into silence, she stepped straight into the spotlight. Red carpets glittering, dinners, power tables in Hollywood, she smiled for the cameras as if nothing had happened. Witnesses claimed those weren't just social outings. They were strategy sessions, gatherings that felt more like war councils than casual dinners. Every conversation revolved around one thing: influence. Her plan, insiders whispered, was not defense, it was offense. She sought to recast herself not as the betrayer, but as the wronged. A woman crushed under the weight of a man's empire, finally clawing her way to independence. The narrative was dangerous because it resonated. To the public, she looked like the phoenix rising from the Ashisa woman, breaking free from the shadow of the world's richest man. And in sharp contrast, Bezos appeared, drained shoulders, sagging eyes, heavy a titan stripped of his armor. The media devoured the imagery, a broken king and a triumphant queen. But beneath that glossy surface, both sides were sharpening weapons. For Bezos, the battlefield was the law. He quietly assembled a legal dream team, specialists and financial warfare attorneys, whose names alone sparked fear in corporate corridors. These were not lawyers who argued. These were lawyers who destroyed. Their mission was clear: to dismantle Lauren with every legal avenue available. Allegations of betrayal, lawsuits claiming manipulation, even whispers of secret clauses buried in old contracts, clauses that could swing billions with a single interpretation. Lauren's arsenal, however, wasn't built for courtrooms. Hers was the media. She was determined to own the narrative, to shape public opinion until every headline tilted in her favor. To her, it wasn't about defending herself, it was about rewriting the story, ensuring that when history was told, she would not be cast as the villain, but as the heroine who dared to rise. If Bezos commanded wealth, Lauren wielded influence. If his weapons were lawyers and contractures were cameras, podcasts, and whispers at Hollywood soirees. This wasn't just a breakup. It wasn't just about billions in dispute. It was a war where love blurred into betrayal, and private wounds spilled into the theater of public spectacle. the richest man in the world against the woman who dared to defy him. And yet no one knew the firestorm was only beginning. The murmurs that once lived in the shadows now echoed across headlines week after week. For the first time in decades, Bezos wasn't driving the narrative, he was chasing it. The world's most powerful businessman, a man who could shift markets with a single glance, suddenly found himself cornered by stories he didn't control. His polished PR machine was no match for the flood of leaks, the drip of rumors timed with surgical precision. One morning, it was whispers of strange investments in aviation. The next, speculation about rifts in his personal circle, questions about whether those closest to him were steering his judgment. On the surface, these fragments looked scattered, harmless, but to anyone paying attention, the pattern was obvious. Someone was orchestrating this. Someone was weaving a story around Bezos, a story he could not erase, could not silence. And at the center of it all stood Lauren Sanchez, the glamorous partner who had once walked red carpets at his side. Her television background, her effortless charm, her ability to command attention, qualities once celebrated as her gifts were now recast as weapons. Analysts debated. Was she still the supportive partner in a Hollywood love story, or had she transformed into something far more dangerous? A strategist, a power broker, a woman capable of shaping the destiny of the world's richest man with a whisper, a Smalaya leak. And with each passing day, her spotlight grew brighter. But so did the doubts. Who stood to gain from the steady drip of leaks? Who else had access to details so intimate they could only come from someone trusted inside Bezos's orbit? The timing was uncanny. Again and again, analysts noticed subtle ripples in Amazon's stock, tiny shifts that came just before explosive headlines about Bezos hit the press. To the market, it looked like whispers were leaking ahead of the news. Some traders suspected insider information was in play, though no one dared put their name to such accusations. Coincidence? Or something far more deliberate? In the fragile world of billionaires, where fortunes hang on perception, even the faintest suggestion of impropriety can send shockwaves. Competitors circled like sharks sensing blood. Some went on record hinting Bezos was slipping. Others, more discreet, toasted quietly to the idea of watching a giant falter. Inside Bezos's own empire, the pressure was unbearable. Invitations to his famed yacht gatherings dried up. Old confidants were suddenly left on the outside. Trusted advisors, once the architects of bold strategies, were quietly replaced. Employees whispered about surprise audits, tightened surveillance, and an atmosphere where every message, every call was under scrutiny. What had once been the smooth engine of a trillion-dollar enterprise now felt more like a fortress under siege. The higher the walls grew, the more it seemed Bezos no longer feared rivals beyond the gate. She feared betrayal from within. Meanwhile, Lauren was fighting her own war in the arena she knew best, Hollywood. A city that devours drama, reinvents stories, and crowns new icons overnight. Some magazines cast her as the dazzling queen who now stood as the power behind Bezos. Others questioned her entirely. Was she a partner rising to independence or a manipulator playing the long game? Each headline added fuel to the fire, keeping her name and their war burning in the public eye. Even the simplest interviews Lauren gave on aviation, on philanthropy, on seemingly harmless causes were picked apart like coded messages. Was she signaling loyalty to Bezos? Or was she carefully sketching out a separate identity, one that no longer needed him? Every sentence became a clue in a puzzle no one could fully solve. For a woman who had once thrived in television, this level of forensic attention was suffocating. Their appearances in public became another battlefield. At times, they looked untouchable, walking red carpets side by side, projecting the image of unity. But other moments betrayed cracks. A glance that lingered too long, a smile delayed by half a beat, a shadow of distraction caught on camera. Audiences replayed these clips in slow motion, searching for proof of fractures beneath the glitter. In the digital age, a single pause in eye contact was enough to spark a week's worth of headlines. Behind the facade, Bezos fought a different war. He tasked his most trusted attorneys with hunting the leaks, tracing every thread, every anomaly. Was the source a disloyal employee? A cunning financial rival? Or was the betrayal closer hidden behind familiar eyes? Leads appeared promising, then collapsed into dead ends. For a man who built an empire on precision and control, this endless chase through shadows was maddening. But silence wasn't an option. Bezos was too visible, his fortune too immense, his company too vital to the global economy. Every move he made was scrutinized, analyzed, magnified. To ignore the rumors risked fueling them. To fight them head-on risked validating them. It became a brutal balancing act project strength while refusing to dignify whispers. History had seen few leaders endure such a relentless cycle of suspicion, and even fewer emerge without scars. And yet amid the noise, unlikely allies began to step forward. Titans of business and politics voiced support, insisting Bezos was the victim of calculated sabotage. They framed the leaks not as a weakness, but as proof of the price one pays for standing at the top. Some defended Bezos, calling the leaks an unavoidable cost of success. Others argued Lauren was being unfairly vilified, reduced to cliches simply because she was a woman standing beside a powerful man. They pointed to history where partners of billionaires were often portrayed as opportunists rather than equals. But these defenses only added fuel to the fire. Was Bezos truly the victim of a coordinated attack, or was he leveraging sympathy to rewrite his own narrative? Was Lauren a pawn in a sexist narrative, or a mastermind skillfully bending the story to her will? The questions multiplied faster than answers could keep pace. What began as a private love story had now erupted into a global saga with economic, cultural, and social consequences. It was no longer about two people in a relationship. It was about power, loyalty, and betrayal playing out on the biggest stage in the world, where every whisper had value and every headline carried weight. In truth, billionaires rarely fall because of external rivals. Their empires crumble from within through fractured loyalties, hidden agendas, and the betrayals of those closest to them. For Bezos, that threat grew heavier with every passing headline. The storm surrounding him was not calming. It was evolving, expanding, drawing in business titans, media voices, politicians, and millions of curious onlookers. In the world of the ultra-rich, scandals never remain simple. They ripple outward, touching industries, markets, and legacies. And now Bezos was no longer just navigating a romance gone sour. He was managing a saga with the power to reshape his empire. The question was no longer if he could survive the storm. The question was whether he even knew where and with whom that storm had truly begun. Every leak, every whisper, every shadow of doubt left its mark on the man who once seemed untouchable. The change was subtle at first, but undeniable. Jeff Bezos, once the commanding voice who could bend industries with a single sentence, now carried himself differently. In interviews, his words came slower, measured with surgical care. His tone, once filled with the restless energy of a man dreaming of rockets and digital empire, dulled into caution. Observers who had followed his journey from Amazon's scrappy beginnings to its trillion-dollar throne could see it clearly. The visionary had given way to a guardian, a man more concerned with defending his legacy than expanding it. Lauren Sanchez, meanwhile, had become a force the media couldn't ignore. Once photographed simply as the glamorous figure on Bezos's arms, he was now a subject of constant analysis. Commentators debated her every move. Was she demonstrating loyalty in the face of turmoil, or carefully staking her independence in the spotlight? Hollywood insiders whispered that she was perfectly built for this arena, woman who understood the mechanics of attention better than most. Some insisted she thrived in the chaos, that for Lauren even controversy was currency. Regardless of the angle, lone fact remained. Lauren was no longer defined as Jeff Bezos' partner. She had become something larger, a symbol of ambition, influence, and the razor-thin line between love and strategy in the gilded world of billionaires. And the press, ever hungry for spectacle, made sure that symbol was impossible to ignore. Headlines soon framed Jeff Bezos as a man trapped between two worlds, his personal vulnerability and his corporate responsibility. Lauren, meanwhile, was cast in extremes, either the loyal ally at his side or the most dangerous threat within his walls. The truth, of course, was far more complex. But complexity rarely wins in the court of public opinion. Audiences crave clarity, a hero, a betrayer, and the scandal that rattles the throne. And so the narrative hardened, suspicion became fact, drama became destiny. Behind closed doors, Bezos' team scrambled to rewrite the script. Public relations advisors floated strategies. A single whisper attached to a man as powerful as Bezos could move billions. Reports of unusual stock activity began to circulate, prompting discreet inquiries. Nothing concrete emerged, but the suspicion lingered. And in finance, a suspicion is poison. Meanwhile, trust within Bezos' circle eroded. Friends who once lounged on his yachts or dined at his estates noticed the distance. Invitations thinned. Conversations turned clipped. Questions once met with candor now drew guarded answers. Bezos was building walls, but walls don't shield betrayal. They only announce fear. And in circles fueled by ambition and access, fear is read not as caution but as weakness. Lauren, on the other hand, appeared untouched by the storm. Lauren moved through public life with her trademark ease, smiling for cameras, slipping into gowns that caught the flashbulbs, embracing the spotlight instead of retreating from it. Whether by calculation or instinct, she leaned into the attention. To some, it looked like arrogance. To others, it was proof of resilience. Either way, one thing was certain. Lauren was no longer a supporting figure in Jeff Bezos' story. She was the headline. The woman whose every move now shaped the unfolding drama. Behind the glamour, whispers of betrayal grew sharper. The leaks were too precise, too perfectly timed to dismiss as coincidence. Bezos' once vast inner circle shrank to a handful, yet even in that small group, suspicion festered. Allies eyed each other with unease. Every closed-door meeting carried the tension of a trap about to spring. The paranoia Bezos once kept hidden was now written on his face. Billionaires often believe themselves above such human frailties. But here stood the richest man alive, undone not by rivals in the market, but by doubts festering in his own house. And the world could not look away. Talk shows picked apart every rumor. Online forums spun theories faster than headlines could confirm or deny them. Was the betrayal about money? About love? Or something far more strategic, an orchestrated attempt by hidden players to destabilize Bezos' empire with weaponized whispers? In the end, the truth mattered less than the spectacle. And the spectacle was irresistible. Through it all, Bezos pressed forward with his empire, rockets, investments, philanthropy projects that once commanded the world's awe. But now, they were overshadowed by something far more human, the scandal that blurred the line between love and power. For all his wealth, Bezos had stumbled upon a brutal truth of the modern age. Personal narratives can eclipse even the grandest legacies. People cared less about rockets or retail revolutions and more about betrayal, whispered in the shadows of his empire. And so the saga only deepened. Each new headline landed like a calculated move in a high-stakes game. Every photograph of Bezos and Lauren was dissected for cracks and awkward glances, a forced Smollett touch that lingered too long or not at all. Whispers carried enough weight to rattle markets, and rumors spread faster than any press release could contain. The storm was no longer something to endure. The only question now was whether Jeff Bezos had the strength and the alias to survive it. What began as hushed speculation in financial circles had spiraled into a global obsession, part corporate intrigue, part Hollywood melodrama. Every new development tightened the net around him. To the world, Bezos still projected control, his movements measured, his voice steady. But behind the polished mask, cracks spread. Even the richest man alive could not dictate how the world chose to see him. The real danger was not in the headlines themselves, but in the uncertainty they created. Markets can price triumph. They can price disaster. But uncertainty? Uncertainty corrodes everything. And now confusion shadowed Bezos everywhere he went. Investors demanded reassurance, but reassurance without authenticity only fueled more suspicion. Each carefully crafted statement spawned fresh questions. Each public appearance ignited new theories. The empire built on clarity and trust was drowning in fog. Inside his shrinking circle, attention reached a breaking point. Allies exchanged wary glances. Conversations felt rehearsed, words measured like currency too scarce to spend freely. The paranoia Bezos once fought to bury now consumed him. He demanded answers. Who was behind the leaks? Who profited from the whispers that struck at his most vulnerable moments? But the deeper he searched, the more the truth dissolved into shadows. Every lead pointed to another possibility. Every suspect had a defense. And the man who once commanded absolute certainty was left grasping at doubt. It was a maze with no exit, and with every passing day, Bezos felt the walls closing in. And always at the center of that storm stood Lauren. Her presence was inescapable, both his shield and his shadow. To some, she was the unwavering partner who refused to leave his side when the world turned hostile. To others, she was the spark that ignited the fire consuming him. Neither version was entirely true, but truth had long ceased to matter. In the ruthless economy of tabloids and talk shows, perception was the only currency that counted. And perception cast Lauren as a mystery victim or mastermind loyalist or betrayer. Hollywood embraced the spectacle with open arms. Talk shows dissected her every glance, every phrase. Magazines mapped out the timeline of her romance with Bezos, scouring for patterns like investigators at a crime scene. Even her wardrobe was treated as a code to be cracked, each color, each fabric, interpreted as a signal of hidden intent. And through it all, Lauren smiled. Maybe it was resilience, maybe calculation, maybe simply instinct. But she never broke, and in her refusal to falter, the fascination only deepened. For Bezos, that smile was both salvation and torment. Side by side, she helped him project unity. But her very presence also kept the spotlight fixed on the one question he most wanted to escape. Together, they became unwilling actors in a theater they no longer controlled. Frame by frame, gesture by gesture, their lives were replayed, slowed down, analyzed for meaning. In this world, image mattered more than truth, and Bezos had lost the power to direct the script. As the months dragged on, the whispers hardened into a narrative of their own. Rivals circled like predators, sensing blood. Competitors struck aggressively, exploiting the distraction. Politicians who once sought his favor now kept their distance. Even his philanthropic efforts meant to reshape his legacy were cast in doubt. Was his generosity heartfelt or merely camouflage for a man under siege? Still, Bezos refused to retreat. He doubled down on the future, on rockets, innovation, and a vision of humanity stretching beyond Earth. On stage, he spoke in soaring language of bold frontiers, of dreams too vast for ordinary limits. It was the speech of a man trying to remind the world who he truly was. But behind the grand words, the shadow remained. Because betrayal, whether proven fact or whispered suspicion, leaves scars deeper than balance sheets. Scars that no amount of wealth, power, or vision can erase. Perhaps the leaks came from ruthless rivals in business. Perhaps they slipped through careless whispers of those too close to the center. Or perhaps most dangerously, they were born from something far more personal, the very relationships that once seemed unshakable. In the end, the source mattered less than the response. And Jeff Bezos' response revealed a chilling truth. Even the richest man alive cannot escape the fragility of trust. For Laurenti, saga rewrote her image forever. She would never again be seen as only a television personality or even just the partner of Jeff Bezos. She had become a symbol in a larger drama, a story of power, ambition, loyalty, and suspicion. To some, she emerged stronger than ever, proof that she could endure a storm few others could survive. To others, she remained an enigma, her motives always under question. But whether admired or doubted, one thing was certain: she could no longer be ignored. And so the story of Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez slipped into legend, not because it reached a clear ending, but because it refused to. It lived on in speculation, in whispers without answers, in the uneasy space between love and power, between loyalty and betrayal. For Bezos, the lesson was brutal. Empires may be built on innovation, but they can be shaken by whispers. Wealth can buy influence. It can buy power. It can even buy silence for a while. But it cannot buy trust. And once trust fractures, even the mightiest can fall into shadows they cannot control. The storm may one day calm. The headlines may fade. But the questions remain. Who truly betrayed Jeff Bezos? Who stood by him? And perhaps most haunting of all, can even the richest man alive ever really know? And if you want to uncover more hidden truth, subscribe now to The Top Boxing. This storm is only the beginning.